All right, let's just get right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to completely shatter your perception of what a normal book actually is. When most of us think of a book, we usually just picture a simple collection of paper and ink, right? Like a paperback you just toss in your bag without a second thought. But today, we're looking at objects that somehow became some of the most valuable items ever owned by human beings. We're going to explore exactly why ancient books cost millions of dollars.
So, what if I told you one single book could cost more than an actual private jet? No way, right? I mean, it sounds totally absurd. We aren't talking about a massive flawless diamond here or some towering Renaissance painting. We are literally talking about a book, a bound stack of pages that commands the kind of extreme luxury wealth usually reserved for high end aviation. Well, the answer to that question comes down to this staggering number, $60 million. And we're not just talking about rare first editions you might stumble across in some dusty antique shop. We're talking about priceless pieces of history that actually changed human civilization forever. These artifacts carry the immense weight of time, and that is exactly why they command such astronomical valuations.
So let's kick things off with Section 1, the value of artistry.
To really wrap our heads around these insane prices, we have to look at our first case study. It's this breathtaking manuscript known as the Rothschild Prayer Book. And honestly, this is an artifact that actually remained completely hidden from the world for centuries. What's just unfathomable here is the sheer labor that went into creating this object. Created around the year 1505, this wasn't just run through some standard printing press. Every single page was painted entirely by hand. We are talking about thousands of hours of painstaking work by master medieval artists using brilliant colors and, get this, real gold. They literally applied delicate gold leaf to the pages, creating these tiny, intricate details that are almost impossible to fully appreciate unless you're right up close with a macro lens.
And all that mind-blowing artistry, it brings us right to this incredible figure, $50 million. When the hammer finally fell in a tense auction room back in 2014, the crowd just quietly reacted as the Rothschild Prayer Book sold for nearly 50 mil. You have to realize, the collectors bidding on this thing weren't just buying old paper, they were buying over 500 years of surviving, beautifully preserved history.
But hey, extreme artistry isn't the only thing that drives these prices up. Let's transition to our next category, Section 2, History over Beauty.
Just imagine, for a second, actually holding the very first book ever printed in British North America. It perfectly illustrates this next contrast. So on one side, we've got the opulent Rothschild Prayer Book we just talked about, dripping in brilliant colors, real gold, thousands of hours of labor, the whole shebang. But contrast that with the Besant book, which was printed by early settlers back in 1640. Its pages are definitely not beautiful. They're actually incredibly simple, just plain ink spreading across handmade paper. Yet, it's a surviving historical relic, and only a handful of these copies even exist in the world today.
The big takeaway here is this. Sometimes history is just worth way more than beauty. That sheer simplicity tells this extraordinary story of early settlement and the very dawn of a new era of printing. And that heavy historical weight, that's exactly what drove a single copy of the Besant book to sell for over $14 million back in 2013.
All right, moving on to our next value driver, Section 3, Books Fit for Kings. Some books were literally never meant for ordinary readers like you and me. They were designed from day one to be the ultimate symbols of royal exclusivity and elite prestige. Take the famous Gospels of Henry the Lion, for example. This masterpiece was created for one of Europe's most powerful rulers. Just picture a giant manuscript being carefully illuminated by monks as sunlight passes through the stained glass of a medieval cathedral. The book was completely covered with gold and heavily decorated with actual physical jewels. It was so stunningly ornate that every single illustration looked more like a piece of standalone fine art than a standard page in a book. And because of that unbelievable royal exclusivity, plus the physical wealth embedded right into its cover, it commanded nearly $12 million. And get this, that sale happened way back in 1983. The valuation of these elite, jewel-encrusted artifacts is simply staggering when you put it into perspective. Okay, this is where things get absolutely wild. Let's jump to Section 4, the Notebook of Genius. We've finally hit the ultimate value driver and the single most expensive book ever sold in human history, Leonardo da Vinci's Codex Leicester. To clearly define exactly what this artifact is, it's a manuscript written entirely by da Vinci himself. It contains his private thoughts, his deep personal observations, and his incredibly forward-thinking sketches. See, here, buyers aren't paying for gold covers or embedded jewels. They're paying for something so much rarer: unfiltered, direct access to the mind of a singular human genius. You're basically seeing the ink flow directly from his feather quill. If we actually break down the brilliant ideas packed into this thing, you'll find a massive breadth of knowledge. We're talking about deep dives into astronomy, water, the moon, and engineering. Da Vinci was sketching mechanical inventions rotating in 3 dimensions and intensely analyzing how the moon reflected in water. Even today, so many of these sketches and ideas feel centuries ahead of their time. It's mind-blowing.
So let's talk about the modern financial reality of owning this level of genius. Back in 1994, the Codex Leicester was purchased in this elegant auction room by none other than Microsoft founder Bill Gates. The purchase price? A cool $30 million. But if we adjust that for today's equivalent value, that manuscript is worth well over $60 million.
Seriously, imagine owning the notebook of one of history's absolute greatest minds. Really take a second to think about the magnitude of that. To hold Da Vinci's personal, unedited thoughts right in your hands. It completely transcends the traditional concept of what a book even is.
Which brings us right to our final section: why ideas are priceless.
We've talked about jaw-dropping artistry, wild historical scarcity, royal opulence, and pure human genius. But the real philosophical reality of why these items hold such lasting, immense worth? It comes down to this: ideas outlast kingdoms and fortunes. Long after empires disappear and massive fortunes fade into obscurity, these ideas survive. The world's rarest books aren't valued for the paper they're printed on. They're valued for the irreplaceable stories and the profound knowledge they carry. And that, ultimately, is why ancient books cost millions. So let's wrap up this explainer by turning the spotlight over to you with a final provocative question. Which book would you want to own if money wasn't an obstacle? Would you go for the jeweled cover of a king, the historical first print of the Besom book, or the notebook of an absolute genius? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And hey, if you love these structured visual deep dives into the hidden stories behind history's greatest artifacts, make